Hey worship leader, are you ready for round 3? If you're wondering what I'm talking about or if you're wondering who I am, I'm Jimmy Cooper. Welcome to Hey Worship Leader. Now we're in the middle of a 5-part series where I'm walking you through how to dial in the 5 Line 6 Helix or HX Stomp reverbs. If you missed the first 2 videos, that's okay. You can catch the links down in the description. Also, let me say I have a cold today, so I hope that doesn't bother you. Should I address it? I don't know, because maybe now that's all you're going to pay attention to. That's okay. Now in the first 2 videos, we covered the Glitz reverb and then we covered the Ganemy reverb. And I put out a survey over on Instagram and on the community tab here on YouTube, and I asked you guys which of the 5 or which of the 3 remaining reverbs would you want me to dial in next. And the answer was very clear. Y'all voted for Searchlights.
Yay!
So that's what we're gonna do today. But before we get into dialing in the Searchlights reverb, I have 2 things I want to talk about, and one of them I forgot to mention in the last video. The first is that you can get some really good sounds out of these reverbs with some different routing options, but that's not what we're gonna cover today. What I want to do today is see how good we can get these to sound by just dragging and dropping them into our signal chain. Instead of messing with different routing options, we're just going to be tweaking the parameters inside the effect. Number 2, as always in this series, I'm trying to give you 3 different tones, 3 different sounds, a rhythm tone, a lead tone, and an ambient tone. And actually today I found a 4th tone I think you're going to be excited about, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Now in this series, I know that some of these reverbs are better suited for certain sounds than others, but my goal was to see if we could get each of these 3 sounds, the lead, the rhythm, and the ambient, all out of one reverb if we had to. What can it do? Can it cover all the bases? I don't know. Let's find out. All right, let's jump into HX Edit here. As always, we have a Fender style amp as well as a dual cab. Now that comes from my preset bundle over on heyworshipleader.com in the store. You can go check that out. Link is in the description. So to follow in suit with the other videos, what we're going to do today is we're going to do 3 things. We're going to ask what makes it special. What does this reverb do? What makes it unique? Then we're going to tame it. We're going to take out everything so that we can do step 3 and bring back what we want for each particular sound that we're going for. All right, let's pull in our Searchlights reverb, stereo, Searchlights, and hear what it sounds like. A lot of different things going on there. Very ambient reverb. Let's go ahead and assign this to foot switch 2 so we can click it on and off. So looking at this, we have modulation, speed, and intensity here. This is probably what's going to make this special. I have a lot of decay already up. To hear what it does, I like to turn the mix all the way up. Let's bring the decay down a little bit. And let's go ahead and bring all these parameters all the way up just to see what they do. That speed gets pretty slow and then it ramps up pretty fast. Bring down the intensity. Alright, so it sounds like the name Searchlights is aptly named because what I feel is this kind of swirly sound, kind of like a lighthouse twirling around looking for somebody. To be honest, that swirly noise can kind of get a little annoying after a while. But that's what makes this reverb special, and so if you're going to use this reverb, it's because you want that sound. So first, let's get our rhythm tone. Now when we look for a rhythm tone, I usually bring our decay all the way out. Let's bring our mix down. Let's take out everything. We're doing the first step. We're taming it. We're taking everything out. Let's start with mix at 50 so we know that's our medium point, our center point, and this is what we have. We also have our low cut off. Let's put that all the way up, and our high cut. Let's see what that does. Now we have a very ambient reverb here, but if we're gonna have a rhythm tone, we want it to almost sound like a room reverb, something very short, very warm, so it doesn't mess up our multi-noted chords. You get what I'm saying? A chord has a lot of different notes in it, and so reverbs that are very ambient can get very muddy really quick. So we want a rhythm tone to be kind of short and warm so it doesn't get in the way of all that. This is with everything out. Even with the decay all the way out, it still has a pretty long tail, if you can hear that. That sounds pretty good already. Bring that high cut up a little bit and see. For a rhythm tone, let's see what it sounds like with a little overdrive. I have the Minotaur here. Let's see what that sounds like. Reverb off. So it sounds pretty good, but it kind of just sounds like a regular room reverb at this point, maybe a little bit more spacey, but let's give a little bit more of what this reverb adds to it. So let's bring the low cut back down. We don't want to go too low, but somewhere in the 80s is where the guitar shouldn't go below that. And then we'll bring this up a little bit. Let's bring the mix down. See what we got before we add modulation. Sounds pretty clean, light and airy, but and not too thick. Now with a short tail like a rhythm tone like this, you could probably bring the modulation up and not really be able to hear it that much. The speed of this, we don't want it being quick. Let's just do something low with low intensity. Well, let's see what high intensity sounds like. See, on this, it kind of has this like a phaser or something. And I don't really like that. With the intensity down, can't really hear that as much, but it still gives it some movement. I think that sounds pretty good for a rhythm tone. Now I mentioned a fourth tone earlier, and before we get into the ambient and the lead tones, I want to go ahead and talk about that fourth tone now. I see a lot of people asking if the HX Stomp can do something similar to what the Electro-Harmonix freeze pedal can do. What it does is when you play a note, you play anything, a chord, you click on it, it'll hold whatever is in that signal for that moment forever until you let go. So what it does is it just drones on that tone, and then you can play on top of it. It's kind of like playing over a pad, but a pad that you make or you play over something that you may download kind of moves around, where a freeze, this drone is just droning over the same note. Now what we can do with this Searchlights Reverb is something similar. It doesn't hold the tone like that other pedal, like the freeze pedal. It doesn't hold that same tone, but the way the reverb sits under the tone and the way it kind of drones on, it sounds similar. It has a similar effect, and I'll show you how to dial that in now. Let's save that, go ahead and drop in another Searchlights stereo reverb. Now what we want to do to get this effect is bring the decay up. We're going to add all the pre-delay so that we hear our note first. What pre-delay does is it separates our tone that we picked from the reverb effect. So we want as much of that as we can get. Let's go ahead and do these cuts all the way on, both directions, high cut, low cut. Mix, we're just going to bring it down a little bit. Let's turn the modulation section off for a second and hear what this sounds like. Now for the modulated section, let's take this up pretty high Speed somewhere in here. Intensity still pretty low, just to give it some movement. I like to bring the speed down to where you don't really hear that, but it still gives it some movement. You guys hear how it drones on even though we play on top of it? It sounds pretty cool. It sounds a lot to me like that freeze, especially if you start on the root chord. Isn't it cool how that just drones on? It's pretty clean as long as you play pretty much the same volume. You hit the one chord first, you can play over it. You hit the different chords, it sounds pretty good. I noticed it can get a little muddy if you play like overdriven stuff and you play a lot of high notes, because those high notes will get stuck in that drone of the reverb. If it does get in the way, you could always just bring the mix down a little bit more. And that will go on forever. All right, let's work on our lead tone. We'll bring in a stereo searchlights. Now for a lead tone, what we want is a little bit thicker reverb. We want a little more modulation, but we don't want it getting in the way of our notes, so we'll still have the pre-delay up. And yeah, let's dig in and see what we can make this sound like. Let's bring the decay down a little bit. Pre-delay up. We don't have to max it out, but pretty high. Go ahead and bring this low cut up. But let's add some highs. We don't want the lows of the reverb making our signal muddy, but we do want some of that high shining through because this is a lead tone. We want it to cut through. So if it sounds a little more harsh, that's okay because we want it to stand out in the mix. As always, let's pull out the modulation. We'll add that in a bit and see what we got so far. That already sounds pretty good even with no modulation. Let's go ahead and assign this to foot switch 2. Save our work. Now let's bring in some modulation. Let's bring that all the way up. Let's see what we have there with the modulation all the way up. Bring it all the way out. I don't like that much modulation in there. We'll bring it down a little bit. bring the low cut down, play with that a little bit. I think that sounds pretty good. I think just the mix. Let's play with the mix a little bit. We'll take the mix real low. I think that sounds pretty good. Basically, it's up to your taste, but somewhere in this region, in the 30s, between 30 and 40, when you get up to 50, closer to 50, it gets a little too wet, I would think. Especially in the live setting, so I'd pull that down 35, 36. Alright, that sounds pretty good for a lead tone. Let's work on our ambient tone. Bring in another clean reverb, stereo, searchlights, controller assign, foot switch 3. And it's already an ambient reverb, but let's see what we can do to tighten it up a little bit. Now with ambient stuff, we're thinking single note or finger picking, very few notes, or even swells. If you're doing swells, you don't want the pre-delay on at all. If you are finger picking, and I noticed it may have been a little confusing in the previous video, if you're doing a lot of finger picking and you want it to be also be very ambient, you will want to bring up the pre-delay a little bit more so that you hear those notes. But for the most part on ambient stuff, you don't need the pre-delay. We'll bump the decay up a little bit. Bring this low cut all the way up. Bring the high cut about where it is. I like 83. We can leave the mix. Sometimes I bump it up a little past 50. We'll play with that in a second. Modulation, let's bring that all the way up. And I think we just need to mess with this speed and intensity. It's the intensity that tends to get me. So let's take that all the way out and play with the speed. Now that's very similar to our drone or our freeze setting, but we want a little bit more movement. So I'm gonna mess with the intensity, bring that up a little bit, and yeah, let's see what we got. Maybe bring that speed down a little bit. Maybe even the intensity down a little bit. It gets annoying after a while, that little swirling. Bring the high cut down a little bit more. All right, so what'd you guys think? Did you like Searchlights? Do you use it? Did you not use it, but now you will, knowing you have some different options? Did you even like it? I don't know if I liked it. Every time I mess with these HX Stomp reverbs, sometimes I like them and sometimes I'm like, no, I'll just stick to my other reverbs. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Also, I want to know, do you think that freeze setting is usable, or do you have another setting that you use to kind of get that freeze effect where you can just freeze the tone and play on top of it? Let me know that down in the comments as well. I haven't looked into it too deep to see if I can dial anything else in that way, but I just, when playing with this reverb, I noticed, I was like, hey, that kind of sounds like it, so thought I would try it. Well, that wraps it up for today's video. Be on the lookout for the other two. I'm just gonna do them in order. I'm gonna do plateau next and then double tank, so be on the lookout for that. Like I said, if you haven't seen the first two videos, go check those out. Links are in the description. If you like this video, please like it, share it with someone that you think it could benefit. Also, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. It really helped me out. I love being a part of the Hey Worship Leader community here. We have a lot of people who put helpful content down in the comments, so thank you guys for that. Keep doing that. I love hearing from you guys. That about wraps it up, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.